All right, it's time to shine the light a little bit on one of my favorite eras of Pink Floyd, and I'm so glad that they decided to restore this piece because I feel like this era always tends to get overlooked or overshined by the era of Pink Floyd that directly precedes it, like starting with the Dark Side of the Moon and going onward to there. We're talking about the spacey, psychedelic, experimental side that was really captured in this 1971-1972 production. So, yeah, let's just dive into it. Pink Floyd live at Pompeii. I guess it's the 2025 edition, MCMLXXII. I'm pretty sure that's whatever that is. They never make it easy for us, do they? So this is the latest release from Pink Floyd of being like a kind of like a remastering. Once again, Steven Wilson, our boy, is back at the control panel, remixing, remastering this whole endeavor, giving it the 4K treatment. And I've been really digging it. So my history with Pink Floyd at, live at Pompeii, I had the, the director's cut DVD back in 2002, which I've been watching since I was in high school. As I mentioned at the top, this is one of my favorite eras of Pink Floyd. Just before Dark Side of the Moon, where you're getting a lot of tracks from Metal, Saucerful of Secrets, and a lot of like the live stuff that they love to do, especially off of Ummagumma. And I'm one of the weird ones that actually like Ummagumma, especially the studio stuff. It's weird, but I kind of love that. I love how quirky, how strange, how avant-garde and experimental they were. And so here we have the entire show. And the one thing I want to talk about right off the get-go is, once again, how well preserved everything is. I grew up with the DVD and watching it on Blu-ray. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the 4K. The 4K wasn't here, and I didn't get the chance to see it in IMAX, which I really wanted to do. So I am limited to my devices. But the Blu-ray itself looks fantastic, especially when you compare it to the DVD. It's lush, it's crisp, it's clear. And unlike the director's cut from 2002, a lot of that really awkward, strange editing stuff that they did, both within the text of the tracks as well as the credits, and a lot of the weird kind of space intersequenced items, a lot of the weird kind of computer-generated stuff, that's all removed, which I always thought was a little bit of a sore thumb in the actual, director's cut version of the film. Here, it's kind of back to basics, which I really, really appreciate, because that was the original thought. Luckily with the 2002 director's cut, we actually have Adrian Mabin, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, the director and the, kind of the initiator of this whole idea, being like, originally we wanted it to be just shots of art with Pink Floyd's music, and we realized how bad of an idea that was. But I'm like, it's not really that bad of an idea, because you guys showcase a lot of the art from Pompeii, especially within that kind of Italian village side and that rich culture that they had way, way back in the past. It's still very well preserved. So having that blended with this very timeless music that Pink Floyd was able to construct back in the late 60s, early 70s, provided a really good conversation between those two pieces. And I liked within this edition of the film, that conversation is allowed to blossom and allowed to really have a conversation with one another. And I really appreciate that. The preserving of the past blended with the technology of the time. And it's so interesting now, however many years out we've got, how this is still kind of a relic in and of its own, it's still this preservation, but it's being presented in 4K. So in the same way that we took pictures of the past within Pompeii, we still have that kind of crystal clear, recording from the 70s now within 2025. And so again, that conversation, it's still going on. And I really, really appreciate and I love that touch. Steven Wilson has done a fantastic job of restoring this audio. The DVD audio was already pretty good, but the amount of space, that was the one thing that I really noticed within the film, as well as I also picked up the vinyl because I had to, is the amount of space between all the instruments. You can very clearly recognize where Roger Waters' bass work or his cymbal work is playing in conjunction with Nick Mason on the drums, or Rick Wright on the keyboards, or David Gilmour doing his weird experimental guitar work, and the amount of space between all is just leagues, and it gives so much breadth to this instrumentation, especially when you're dealing with songs like Set Controls to the Heart of the Sun, with Careful with That Axe Eugene, with Saucer Full of Secrets, where there's so much going on sound-wise and musically. Like, it's a lot of very intense, very aggressive music, but you're still able to pick out every little bit. And with this new presentation, I am still in awe of Nick Mason's drum work. I really feel like the boy didn't get his flowers because of how much just amazing experimentation he's doing within the drums, within the rhythm section of a lot of these tracks, specifically on tracks like Saucer Full of Secrets, where he has to spend a good 5 minutes maintaining this pretty intense drum work, while everybody else is playing nebulously around him. It was such a stark statement of his skill work, and how I feel like the later part of the Pink Floyd discography, kind of starting with a little bit On the Dark Side of the Moon, he was kind of pushed further and further away. And this can also be said about Rick's playing style, on the keyboard work, his brilliance on, just the soundscapes and knowing when to use what sounds on the synth and on the piano. This is found on Echoes, and this is definitely found on, like, Careful with This Axe Eugene, or Careful with That Axe Eugene. It really showed how Pink Floyd at this era really was a blending of all four. And even Nick Mason says, yeah, we've had infighting, we've had issues of a band, but we've always been able to get past it for the music. We've always been able to compromise with one another for the music. And it's such a bittersweet take, knowing what would happen in just 10 years' time with the construction of the Wall, of how that infighting essentially imploded upon the band. Remembering a lot of these interviews and a lot of these interactions outside of the actual concert, where, they're in the diner within Abbey Road and they're literally recording The Dark Side of the Moon. Like, what a perfect place, perfect time for this little mini documentary of this recording of such a seminal, standout, groundbreaking album, that you're able to kind of, again, it's all about this conversation of time passing, relics being documented. Yeah, what else is there to say about this new release? I think that this is the ultimate version of this record. This is one of the very few times that a lot of these commenters in my comment section are doing the whole old man yells at cloud, being all, you're too young to appreciate the music. You weren't there when it happened. Yeah, man, I wasn't there when Beethoven was doing his Sixth Symphony. Still one of my favorite pieces around. I'm not going to defend my age, but this is one of the few moments where I really do wish that I was in the theaters in 1972, 1973 to be able to watch the actual film as it was originally recorded, because all that I have at this point are either the bootlegs that I have of this in, CD form, or the DVD that I got back, 20 years ago now. And so I don't really have anything to compare it to that original release. And so that's the only time where I'm like, I wish I had something else to compare it to. As I was saying before I went a little bit on that tangent, I still feel as if this is the definitive way to watch this, or at least to digest it, either through CD, either through Blu-ray or 4K if you can get it, or vinyl. And I know for me, vinylly, this holds one of my favorite eras and favorite live eras of Pink Floyd. So, all that being said, I don't really think I'm going to do a rating of this one. The closest that I'll do is urge everybody to go out and find the version of this that you want. If you're like me and you wanted to get the 4K, but you had to settle for the Blu-ray, pick up the CD, pick up the Blu-ray or 4K if you have those, softwares or hardwares to play it. Pick up the vinyl. This, of course, is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart, but I'm not going to give the actual proper rating title card for that. That's just my recommendation for this. So what do you guys think about this? How did the restoration of this, how did the mixing and remastering of this, how does that compare to your own experience with that? How do you digest this property? How does it fit within your experience of Pink Floyd, please let me know all about that by commenting down below. And I think that's where I'm going to leave you guys for today. I said all I needed to say about this. Absolutely loved it. Go and check it out. So, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.